Sanchez Terrell, and you can find me here every Friday. We have over 200 recordings thanks to American TESOL on various topics, and we even have the ESL Tech course at esltech.com, and you can get a teaching with technology certification from American TESOL. And that is for American TESOL members, but you can free. But if you want and you're not a member, you can always take the course, and there's a small fee for that. But you can always attend these webinars for free, and you can bring as many people as you want, and you can get a certificate of attendance. Today we're going to talk about teaching with comics, and I've updated these resources because the great thing about this is every time we can revisit a topic, there are new ideas and definitely new tools, and there are tools that have gone away. So it's always great to kind of revisit these topics and see what we all can share with each other. You can find the information. If you don't have to take notes, but Peggy George, who's usually here, usually shares these different notes, and to make it a little bit easier for you, you also have the bookmarks and everything at shellyterrell.com /comics, so you can find the slides and things like that, and also the previous recordings. Next week, I'm going to be coming to you from Australia, just FYI, so we'll see how that goes. I'm not quite sure what the time difference is yet for me, but I will be there. It doesn't matter which country that I travel to, I will be there. So I really like this quote by the famous actor Nicolas Cage, and I think it kind of shows why you would want to teach with comics. Comics are a really incredible way to motivate students, especially English language learners. Comic books are really easy for students to be able to understand language, and the reason why is because it matches a lot of Vygotsky's idea of how we learn. And when he talks about the socio-cognitive theory, he talks about how our brain needs to chunk. If we chunk language or we chunk the learning, then our brain processes it. It soaks it in much better. And so it's not surprising that Nicolas Cage really liked comics, and he said, in fact, that's how he learned how to read. So a lot of our students, those that you think may not be motivated, and a lot of times statistically, teachers, especially female teachers, struggle with getting boys to read. And so comic books are a great way to inspire, motivate, and engage all your learners, girls, boys. And there's a lot of great learning involved. Many of the comic books have heroes, and these heroes became heroes, or their powers are based on science. And so there's a lot of ways that you can also introduce students to complicated theories and get them interested in science, technology, engineering, art, and math, STEAM. So one of the first ideas is to get your students to actually look at comics and choose that as your reading materials. So this weather, it's just terrible for my allergies. Oh, sorry about that. So that's definitely something you can do. When you think about choosing your materials, there's different types of materials, novels, popular novels like Twilight, children's books, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, classic books. You can find Shakespeare, you can find Pride and Prejudice. These come in graphic novel form. So when you're choosing which kind of novel or book that your students are going to read for your language learners, ask the publishing company that you deal with if they have a graphic novel form. A lot of them do, or a lot of them have what are called readers. And these are more user-friendly and more and they're easier for those struggling with literacy and language learning as well. Um, and Peggy George asked a very important question in the chat box. Does the layout of comic books change if you're in a country that reads from right to left? Yes, and in fact, sometimes it doesn't. They're changing that now. They're making American versions, but a lot of the ways that in 2007, I listened to an NPR show and they were saying how a lot of Japanese language learners learning English will take the graphic novel, and so a lot of the first graphic novels we had here happened to be the way that the Japanese read and write, because this kind of form of a book actually came from there, many of them. So a lot of times my niece, she loved graphic novels, and that's how she learned how to read. And she was the top in her, she had the highest score in all the school and district for her science and math test scores. And she read graphic novels all the time. And so I think that that was one of the reasons why she was she's very smart and stuff. So you can actually find some free. So if you're looking for materials, and don't think that this is actually comics are good to engage readers from all ages. When I was teaching adults in Germany, a lot of I introduced comics to the adults, and some of them were even 70, 60, and they love sharing and talking about their comics. So that was one of the first ways that I introduced the concept of comics to adults. So that way they would take it seriously. But one of the things that we did was I asked them, I said, well, what are some of your favorite comic books? Did you ever read comic books? And surprisingly, across cultures, it's something that a lot of different people love our comic books and the heroes. So in the chat box, you can tell me what kind of comics do you like? Who are your favorite comic book characters? And did you collect them? Do you still collect them? And who are the ones that inspire you? So you can include that in the chat box. And I see Hatta's putting something. Maybe Peggy. So different people are now, so that's great. Comixology.com and Marvel Comics app have free ones you can use as reading materials. So that's really fantastic. You can find for many different ages, so you can use them with students. So Hedda said Calvin and Hobbes. That's a really good one. Iona said Arcus. Peggy said like The Family. Yes, I liked all of those as well. And if you want one specifically for kids, there's one called kidscomics.com, and that has some friendly comics. Some you buy, some are free, so you can find some there as well. You can teach also you can use a comic strip to introduce your topic, to teach a grammar point. So you can use it, you can take a strip and just use that part. So if you want to teach long term, you can do a comic book or a graphic novel, and they are two different things. So a graphic novel, the reason why I've kind of put them together is because they work in the same principle of frames, having the context, having the characterization, and a lot of times students can infer what is going on, the action taking place, the plot, the action, because you can see how here in the Grammar Man, what is he thinking here? See, so you can read the emotions in different characters. So grammarmancomic.com is one. It's free. You can see it online. And the great thing about Grammarman, it's using it for a single lesson, or you can use it for series lessons, but it's not something long span. If, for example, you downloaded the Marvel comic and we're going to teach with Marvel comics. But when you get these different comic segments, the great thing about Grammarman is he also has YouTube videos. So he animates Grammar Man, so you can get the comic strip, and you can always, of course, print these out if you want, or you can put one up in a projector. So the great thing about comics is that you don't have to necessarily have technology to teach comics. Even getting students to create comics, you can have them draw. They can each draw a different frame. So you can use comics with or without technology. But if you have the technology, then it's even easier because then you can just put in the slide projector, and then your students can see it. So let's get students the other way to use comics, not only as reading materials and not only as segment lessons. You could take something from Grammarman, go to the classroom on Monday, and you can begin using it with your students. It's that fast and easy and quick. But there are many ways that students can create their own comics as well, and they're free tools online. There's tons of them. There's actually probably over 20 free tools, and you can even create comics on your mobile device, or as my new baby that I purchased today, so I'm kind of frazzled, on your Chromebook. So you can create comics in pretty much a lot of different devices. It's very inexpensive, and it'll fit inside my, that's actually what we're doing in a lot of schools for districts that can't afford. So I'm testing out the Chromebook. I guess I'll be a Chromebook expert next. So I'm going to share with you plenty of ideas. And of course, if you want to grab the ideas, you can. You do not have to, once again, necessarily. You can copy the chat a lot of times because Peggy will share a lot of these different tools and things. But you can also go to shellyterrell.com/comics, and you'll be able to find the resources there. So I'll share that with you in a bit. One of the things okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you an idea, and I'm going to introduce you to different comic tools and apps, because for this particular one, usually I'll show you a tool. But what I did was I took examples from that particular, or screenshots, and then that's what I'm sharing with you. So this one, you can use it to create dialogues, and this is in the main ToonDo site. ToonDo is one of the ones that teachers love. It's actually one of my top favorite ones. So I have 3 top favorite comic creation tools. Well, actually 2 for teachers that are great for kids, because the problem is sometimes you'll go and you'll see creations by other comics created by others, and it might be a really good tool. Unfortunately, the students didn't have they don't monitor the site. So these are the ones that I think are most friendly. Like if your students go to toondo.com, they're not going to see anything alarming. They're very good with that. So toondo.com, that's why I think it's one of the best ones. You can also create a book. So like Storybird, they have that kind of feature too, and some other features as well. I think you can even draw on ToonDo. So you can, one idea is for students to create dialogues. So instead of doing the role play that is in your textbook, have your students write that through a comic. And the great thing is comics shield them. So it's protecting them, being, when they publish on the web, it's okay, because you won't, even though this one was published by Christina, you don't know what she looks like, you don't know where she lives, you don't know how old she is, so it's safe for them. You can use comics as writing prompts, and the best place to find it, you can find 350 different ones. So that's, if you used one of these comics every day in your classroom, you'd still have enough for next year. So these are free, and they come in different languages as well. So it's not only, this is from Make Believe Comics, and they have a fantastic app. They have a great app. So ToonDo does not have an app. You can create on makebelieve.com. I think they have over 7 different languages, French, Spanish, different languages. So they can create it, or you can use one of their preset ones, like this one here, and your students can learn history, math, science. They have different subjects, geography, different topics. So whatever you teach, you can cater it to your teaching. You can find a make-believe comics that will support it. So that's why it's one of my favorite tools as well. Um, the other one for mobile devices, so whether you have an Android or whether you have an iOS device, you can use Comics Head. And this is one of the comics created by one of my students. This is Carmen, and Carmen created this, and you see how she highlighted the grammar structures. So you can teach a grammar topic, or you can teach something like prepositions, you can teach something like idioms, and what you can do is you can have your students go and they can use different comic creation tools and highlight it, put it in a different color. So this one is actually, sorry, this is a different one. This is from Marvel Comics. I love Marvel Comics. I think it's really good, and you can use the superheroes. And then, so that's really good because the students will be able to use that and then highlight the grammar structure. But Comics Head is one of my favorites too, and I'll show that much later. Garfield's a really good one too. The problem is that it kind of limits you to using Garfield characters, which is fun. But the other ones let you choose different characters, so that's why I think that they're the top ones. Toondu, Make Believe Comics, and then also Comics Head are the top ones that I like. The three that I like. So they can share digital stories. They can come up with their own plots. One thing you can do is if you have a book that you're teaching. I don't have a book per se here, but let's say you're teaching a novel. Well, if you're teaching a novel, you have your unit. You have a textbook and it's cut into units. You can pair students. You can have them take different units and create that section, and then together you have a whole comic strip. You can put these different comic strips that they print out on something like, you can put it in a Google Doc, and then you can create a comic book, and that you can have them create a class story to save you time, or you can have them create their own stories that they come up with. You can animate an animal or object, and phrase.it is a great way to do that. It's really simple. It's easy to kind of do that with Phrase It. Bubbler is another great one to be able to do something like that. You can do many scenes or not. And this is actually from one of my students too who did this. So you can have little kids especially will love this. You can teach them about animals, have them take a picture of their or pets. That's an idea. That could be the lesson. You might do one on what animals do you love. And what you can do is you can have them take a picture and tell them, take a picture in its habitat. Or, and then they could say, or have an emotion, express emotions. And this one could be a lesson on emotions. What kind of emotion and what is he thinking? You can use comics to also create the context and situation for word problems. So my students, my language learners, and they came from over 12 different countries when I was teaching them in Texas. They had the most problems with word problems. So comics were a great way because they couldn't understand the language because they couldn't picture it. And so this is a great way to get students to take a word problem, and whenever that you're doing practice tests or anything like that, they can use something. This one is actually Bitstrips for schools. They give you free for 30 days. I believe they still do that. But you can go to Rothinks, WordPress.com, and you can see all of the math word problems he has created with Bitstrips. So he's a really good example for this. And once again, this is what it does, math word problems, and you can go to rowthinkswordpress.com. So one of my students did this, and I was really excited about it. You can have them transform a piece of literature. So what they can do is they can take something like Pride and Prejudice, which my student Hakel used Pixton for. She's Pixton.com. And so she was able to recreate a scene from Pride and Prejudice. So you can see where she's narrated this scene, and she's made it modernized. So you can take different types of literature that are very archaic. If you're teaching Shakespeare, you're teaching something like Pride and Prejudice, you're teaching and something that is very difficult language, because some of it is archaic, and archaic means that we no longer really use this in English, and they can make it modern. They can say what the characters nowadays. And then the great thing is I take Hakel's work, and when I do teach Pride and Prejudice, this is how I introduce that section. So once your students created all those for you, take what they did, take the ones that you like, and then with your next batch of students, when you're doing Pride and Prejudice, you can have them look at the comic versions, and then that's a great way to get them interested in the novel. And so they can make their own version as well. There's another one from my student, Carmen. This time, Carmen did this, and she did this with that favorite app that I was telling you, comicshead.com. The reason I like Comicshead is because it allows you to add your own pictures. So a lot of these comic creators don't allow pictures. But the great thing is that with Comicshead, you can either choose their library of characters, and they have tons of them. They have great characters. You can choose their setting, you can choose their text, you can choose their fonts, their speech bubbles. They have a lot of those for free. Or you can draw on it and add your own pictures. So that's why I really love Comicshead. It's one I wish they had a web version, which they don't, but they have a free app, and it's fantastic. It's the best one in my opinion. Um, so here, that's what my student did. She actually took a poem. This one is by Maya Angelou, and she used Comicshead to put Pretty Woman, and to put visuals with it. So I thought that was really nice. Introduce a lesson with comics. Students can also summarize readings with comics. So if they read George the Dragon or something like that, then they can go and they can summarize it. They can create political cartoons, and I think the best one is, so sometimes a comic is called a cartoon too. So there's comics, there's cartoons, and cartoons, political cartoons. So this it looks more like a comic, but they're actually for older learners as well. So the great thing about it is, if you go to wittycomics.com, it looks really good as a political cartoon. The other good thing is that wittycomics.com, I think it's more for adults and teens and things like that. So if you have university students or anything like that, they read a news article, tell them to create a political cartoon of that news article. If there's something in the news now that you're sharing, for example, right now there's things with Syria, there's Egypt, there's a lot of news happening. Your students can go and they can kind of capture this in a political cartoon. The great thing about it too is it is with wittycomics.com, they don't have to register. So you just go to wittycomics.com, you don't sign up for anything, you create the cartoon, and then you can take a screenshot if you don't want your students to sign up for anything, but then use it within you wouldn't be able to publish it to the web unless you signed up. But you could take it and your students could just turn it into you as a screenshot or save it as a PDF. And that's what I have my students do if I don't want them to have to create, to have to sign in and stuff. If I'm doing a workshop, Witty Comics, yes, it does. Does Witty Comics have images of women? Yes, it does. Creasa.com is one of my favorite tools for schools. It's really wonderful. They have a movie one, but they keep updating and changing it. So it would be one of my top ones for, but you can put a different ending or point of view, because a lot of times Creasa has fairy tale characters. So it's a great way to retell a fairy tale. It has Big Bad Wolf, the Three Pigs. It even has Greek and Roman as well. So it's a great way for us to do history, any kind of lessons like that. Mythology, they have like Greek mythology. It's a great way to put interviews. So if you have your students interview someone, instead of writing the interview out, because sometimes we see an interview written like this person said this person said that. If they put in the comic, then the other students are going to read it probably. They'll probably be more interested. So, and then it's great because if they interview someone like their parent or their mom, you could do something on Comics Head where they draw it and they can draw their parent as their hero or something, and they can make it come to life. But it would be a real interview, and then you have the characters and you have the question on one and you have the answer on the other. You can use it to explore societal issues. So here, this one is talking about bullying. This is stripgenerator.com. You don't have to register for this one too. I love this one. It's easy, it's nice, it's good. The problem with Strip Generator is sometimes if the content that other people produce, they don't monitor it as well. So sometimes you might see questionable material. But for teens and university students, it's fine. Recreate a scene from history. So my student used phrase it for this one as well. So they can come and they can tell history. They can explore the language and jokes. So they can have two characters telling a joke, and kind of contextualize what's the pun, what is the underlying, what is the joke, because jokes sometimes are hard to understand. Show how to accomplish a goal. And once again, you see Garfield here. So they can say their goals at the beginning. So many of you next year are going to have goal setting maybe with your students. This is an easy, fun way. So sometimes students are uncomfortable doing things. They don't want to see the rules. They don't want to share their goals. They think it's silly. Well, this is a great way to get them to really think about it, to really share, to because in comics they have characters. It's not like it's coming from them. So I find that my students will take it more seriously. You can have them give visual instructions. Now, howtoons.com is not a comic creator, but howtoons.com has several science and math and different kinds of great instructions in comic form. So you can use this, introduce this, a comic, howtoons.com. You can introduce them. You can have them read how to make ice cream. You can try to make ice cream based on these instructions. That can be your lesson. And then you say, okay, teach us. You're going to teach us, and you're going to learn what is the grammar they're learning. They're learning the grammar of giving instructions, commands, first, second, sequencing, things like that. You can do a lesson on that. And then you can say, okay, so when they're doing and they're following the directions, they can see if they made the ice cream well. And then they can have a discussion of that. So the discussion can be, what does it take to, are comics a good way to introduce instructions? How can you make sure that people can follow your instructions? So then they make their own comics and they learn from these examples. You can highlight the rules, because a lot of times students see that paper and they just see the rules, or they see a poster and they think, rules, and they don't even pay attention to it. But if you show them the rules, or you come up with a class set of rules together, each student can choose a rule that they highlight in comic form. You can explore the different definitions of a word, because many times in English you'll find where words or even phrases mean different things. For example, here we drive on the parkway and we park in the driveway. So that would be something to kind of put in a comic. That's kind of one of those complex ways to look at language. You can post a debate. So sometimes debates will get very heated, and for it to kind of be read and respected, a lot of students do not know how to debate respectfully to support their arguments. That is a skill they have to learn. So if you put it first with a comic, because sometimes if you have those debates in class, it gets very heated, and I've had students cry and stuff or yell. And so we have to go over what is the protocol, or what are the ways to have a good debate. How do we listen? How do we respond and support our arguments? How do we, let's remember, we're not attacking the person. we're going through the argument and making a good stance for our point of view. So you can do this with a comic, because if they mess up in a comic, it's not going to hurt people's feelings. But if you have students yell at each other or something in class, or get emotional or attack each other, that's going to take a lot more effort. You can visualize research, and one of the great things, and I'll tell Nick this on Twitter, and I'll even do this with you on twitter.com. I think it's Ansosanis. But Nick Sosanis is really great. He spoke at he was a keynote speaker at a Reform Symposium conference that Peggy George helped me with. But what we had him talk about was how he created his comic in dissertation form. So you can actually, now it is published. It has been published by Harvard University Press. This was his dissertation for Columbia University. And the reason why I like this is because a lot of times we think comics, because they're called cartoons, or because they're visual, are not a basis for research. But Nick Sosanis has proved that wrong by doing that for creating unflattening and showing his research in comic form. His blog, spinandweave.com, shows you the steps on how he did it. So you can get your students to take his example, look at the examples in spinandweave.com, or you can get his book Unflattening, and then you can ask your students, would you like to, you're going to create a research paper, but your research paper is going to be in comic form. And so that might be a good way to get them to do that. Read Write Think has a comic creator. Read Write Think is just an amazing resource, so I tend to put it in there. Shogger.com is also another way you can upload your own comics, and this is on the web. So if you want one, that is on the web. The thing with Shogger, once again, is they don't monitor their content. So because of that, that isn't. That's why I don't put it as one of my favorite ones for educators. You can find plenty of comics resources if you go to my Symbaloo, if you go to my Pearl Trees. Now, all of these, once again, are at shellyterrell.com, and they're on comics. So I'm going to go ahead and share with you that again. So you can find that. And what I've been working on recently, so shellyterrell.com is actually a new site. So it's separate from Teacher Reboot Camp, but they're going to work hand in hand. And what I'm doing is I'm putting it to where pretty much you can go shellyterrell.com/math, science, English, STEAM, and that way it's much easier to find these resources. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to